there are going to be certain things that House Republicans want that I will not accept. The notion that we would cut, for example, Pell Grants, when we know the single most important thing to our success as a nation long-term is how well educated our kids are.
Today, President Obama put his foot down on Republican plans to cut education spending on the federal level, as you just saw. But most of the damage to our education system is already being done by Republican governors who are systematically handicapping the public school system. In Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker's new budget cuts nearly $900 million in aid to public schools. And in Pennsylvania, Governor Tom Corbett's budget includes $1 billion in cuts for public schools, not to mention the $644 million he wants to cut from higher education, which would mean a 50% reduction in funding for Pennsylvania state universities like Penn State and Pitt. The Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties says the cuts could force schools to raise tuition by 33%. Now, this is the kind of thing that's going around all around the country. And Republicans are implementing these cuts even though they are wildly unpopular. A recent poll showed that only 3% of Americans want to cut education funding. Let me repeat that. 3%, but they do it anyway. Now you might be asking, how can that make any political sense? What you have to remember is you are not their constituency. They believe that their rich donors get them elected, and that's their constituency. And if you look at it that way, it's pretty logical. The tax cuts go to the rich, and you don't get any education for your kids. Now, why would they want that part, though? Because that's interesting, right? Because education cuts could mean that people aren't as well educated, obviously, right? And less educated people equals a cheap labor force and no opportunity for others to challenge the power of the already wealthy. Also, they just cut bargaining rights. So when you put all that together, you don't get an education, or your kids don't, and they don't have any bargaining rights, and they're at the mercy of the already rich and powerful. Look, this is un-American. And the reason it's un-American is not because we're against the rich. I want to be rich. You want to be rich. That's the American dream. And there's, of course, great rich people all throughout the country. Bill and Melinda Gates are doing wonders for education in other places. And it's not about being against the rich. It's that we all want an opportunity at that. And that's what education gives us. It gives all of us the belief that our kids can do it as well. I hope that's not what they're trying to take away from your kids and my kids. Now, let me bring in some guests to talk about this. Ed Rendell is, of course, a former Pennsylvania governor and now NBC News political analyst. And Jonathan Alter is the national affairs columnist for Newsweek and an MSNBC political analyst. First, Governor Rendell, you know, obviously you're from Pennsylvania. Corbett is now the new governor of Pennsylvania. He replaced you. Did he indicate in the election season, maybe he did, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you, that he was going to go for these incredibly deep cuts in education?
No, but to be fair to Tom Corbett, he did say that he was going to have to cut significant portions of the budget. No question about that. But this staggered everybody across the state, and it's symptomatic of what's happening around the country. And remember, federal government only gives 7% to K through 12 education. 7% of the funding comes from the feds. The rest is the state or local property tax.
Jonathan, look, I put out there an interesting theory, right? And I'm not saying that's definitely it, and I'm certainly not saying it's a conspiracy-filled room where they, you know, they say, okay, let's, you know, get the little kids. But, I mean, the first thing they cut is education, and 3% of the people are in favor of it. So I'm trying to figure out why in the world they would do that if it's not this.
I kind of think you're half right. I mean, it's just idiotic of them to cut education because they're screwing us for the future. They're screwing the country. And but the reason that they're cutting is because every state has to balance its budget by law, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have to get the budget into balance. And when they make a choice between their wealthy constituents, as you pointed out, and school kids, they pick the wealthy. It's not because they want cheap labor. In fact, a lot of them run businesses where they need skilled labor, and they're having to import them from overseas. So they don't want to. They're not trying to keep cheap labor by, you know, holding down the people in their state. They're just pound foolish. They're not even penny wise. They're just pound foolish. They're not looking to the future of the country. So the question then becomes, how do you build a movement to use that 3% the fact that only 3% want to cut education, and use the other 97%, say I did learn a little bit of math in school, and build a political movement based on that to throw these guys out of office so this doesn't continue.
Right, but you see, I think what you're incredibly right about is priorities. That we can all agree on. So Governor Rendell, you're in the same situation in Pennsylvania, and your instinct wasn't, let me chop off $1 billion from education, actually more than $1 billion when you combine the public schools and the higher education that he's talking about immediately, and let's make sure we never give any tax raises to the rich or anybody else. You went in a different direction. What does this tell us about the Republican priorities, whether it's in Pennsylvania or across the country?
Well, Cenk, in 8 years as governor, I raised our basic education funding by about $4 billion a year annually. And Pennsylvania went from the bottom third of states in the national test into the top 5, and our 8th graders last year finished first in the country. So money properly targeted makes a big difference. The priorities are terribly skewed, and they're skewed. I think Jonathan made a good point that, yes, business does need an educated workforce. It's shocking that they're making those cuts. And it's not just Pennsylvania, across the country to higher education, because we need a competitive, highly skilled workforce. But it shows that they're so obsessed with not raising revenue, with reducing the deficit. And sure, we have to have a balanced budget. But, Jonathan, there are ways to raise revenue, and there are ways to raise revenue that aren't even that unpopular with the public. For example, in Pennsylvania, you could impose a tax on shale drilling, which the public supports by 70%, and raise a couple of $100 million. So there are ways to raise revenue and balance this. Look, the best approach, every governor, Republican or Democrat, has to cut this year. So give all of the governors that nod. They have to cut because, as Jonathan says, we have a balanced budget requirement. But a joint package of some reasonable revenue increases with cuts is the way to do it. Share the pain. What's wrong, Cenk, with what's going on in the states is there's no pain sharing. In Wisconsin, Governor Walker's putting all the pain on the workers and yet cutting business taxes by $100 million.
No, it's unconscionable, and that's a real problem right there. Governor Rendell and Jonathan, we got to leave it right there because we had the breaking news earlier in the show. But look, one last note on this. The drilling tax that Governor Rendell was talking about is exactly right. Corbett says that the companies would go elsewhere. The gas is in Pennsylvania. They can't go anywhere else. What a terrible excuse.